codependency. I really dislike that word. It's looked at in such a negative light in society. I read something a while back that called it a self-love deficit, and I like that a lot better. So today we're going to talk about self-love deficit and how it looks. There's two types of codependence. There's what we call our typical disempowered codependent. This is a person whose self-worth is determined and maintained by other people's thoughts, feelings, and actions towards them. We can develop and go down this path of the typical disempowered person in childhood trauma. We adapt to contort ourselves to fit someone else's dysfunction, and it can depend a lot on what the dysfunctional family role that they were assigned and stepped into. The first precursor that we have is that inability to feel self-love for ourselves, by ourselves. Instead, we'll often feel a sense of self-loathing and inadequacy, like we're just never good enough. We can tend to feel like there's the hierarchy, this better than, less than dynamic in relationships with other people. And we can tend to feel like we're always lower than the other person in friendships and intimate partner situations, at work. We may belittle ourselves. It's voicing that inner critic voice, which we know is the voice of toxic shame. It's an attempt to inoculate ourselves against external shaming. If it's easier for me to say, oh, well, I'm just X, than to hear someone outside of myself say it. And we often will have feelings of worthlessness. So what is happening, dynamically inside of a person who struggles with the typical disempowered self-love deficit is that they're giving their power away to the other person. The power they're giving away is the power of recognizing that they are good enough in and of themselves, and that what the other person thinks doesn't define them. So they give that power away to the other person and take on, co-opt what that other person thinks of them. And this can turn us into what we call people pleasers or fawning. The people pleasing, that's an attempt to merge with that other person so that we can be accepted, which takes us back to the shame piece, because we are trying to be accepted by our tribe or community or family, because way back when we were children, we wouldn't have survived without our caregivers. I'm 5 years old. I can't put a roof over my head or food on the table. So I have to be accepted. So I have to, in the face of dysfunction, contort myself to fit. What happens with this typical disempowered codependent or self-love deficit is that the sense of self-esteem that gets developed is from helping other people. So it's not taking care of ourselves, learning that our emotions are really important in the body and that we get to express them and have authenticity. We don't have secure attachment, all of that. Our esteem is, what can I do for the other person to make me feel better about myself? And so then we place that value, our value of self, on what we're doing for someone else. The problem comes up because then we can't control what someone else's reaction is. If I do something nice for someone else and they don't see it as doing something nice for them and they berate me, then all of a sudden my sense of self is threatened and at risk, because I don't know who I am at that point, and my worth is tied up in what they think of me. So we neglect ourselves. There's no self-care, there's no self-love at this point. We are masking that internalized toxic shame from the attachment wounding that says, I don't have worth or value. And if I did have a little bit, I have to prove it over and over and over by being selfless. Narcissism and codependency are two sides of the same coin. And I wrote an article a while back about how that looks and how that manifests in us as children based on that dysfunctional family role. If you see somebody who's the golden child within a family, they may have more propensity to go down the narcissistic route, whereas somebody who's the family scapegoat or the black sheep may go down the more codependent route. John Bradshaw, who wrote a book a long time ago on shame, the shame that binds us, I think is the title. I read it years ago. He uses a term called thinly sadistic to describe the niceness that we will have. He explained that a disempowered codependent can sometimes, and without realizing, right, this is not conscious, these things are subconscious, these are neural pathways that were mapped, but the person will use this niceness as a way to get people to then play the a way to get people drawn in, right, and then play the victim for not being recognized for the nice things they do, or appreciated or validated for that niceness. In other words, they're not aware that instead of being truly nice, where they would maybe do things for other people and take care of themselves, they get to this place where they resent the other person for not being noticed.